I myself have experienced 6 sudden deaths. I had a son that died of sudden infant death syndrome. I tucked him into bed in the morning. I just screamed because he was blue. There were people in my life that said, hey, you're okay, because I never really thought I was enough. My mother ended up developing a substance abuse disorder, trying to deal with the tragedy of a suicide.
I cannot imagine how much pain you have gone through.
It's well documented, grief will hit you in waves. You can be somewhere and you're walking down the street and all of a sudden there's a trigger. But I think really grief is also an invitation. You're allowed to grieve, but you're not allowed not to live.
Welcome to the Living a Life in Balance podcast. My name is Abdullah Boulad. I'm the founder and CEO of the Balance Rehab Clinic. My guest today is Dr. Louise Stanger, an award-winning interventionist, traumatic grief expert, and founder of All About Interventions. In this episode, Louise shares the personal multiple sudden losses that shaped her life's mission. She has become since then one of the most renowned interventionists in the world. We explore why interventions are not an ambush but an invitation, and how lasting recovery requires systematic family change. Louise also discusses her latest book, Reflections on Aging, a playbook for embracing joy and purpose at every stage of life. I hope you will enjoy. Louise, what motivated you to do what you do today?
I think I want to see everyone become the best that they can be. Obviously, I was born on a fault line of trauma and have a large story about how I came to where I am. But today, when I look back, I just want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to live their best life possible and to celebrate themselves.
Can you tell us more about the trauma part?
Sure. I'm happy to. That's a funny oxymoron. I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Well, I myself have experienced 6 sudden deaths. I was a third-generation widow, for example. My grandfather died giving a political speech for the governor of Pennsylvania. Before I was born, the summer before I was born, and that obviously in terms of generational trauma affected my mother because he was the apple of her eye. My own, I had a son that died of sudden infant death syndrome. My third child, which you don't expect. I had 2 live births, girls, and you think that the prince is born, the king is born, because, you know, we love to have a little boy. And at 3 months old, I tucked him into bed, and in the morning, I just screamed because he was blue. And then, so I did have a subsequent child after that, but that was definitely jarred my sensibilities. There's a poem by Eugene Field called Little Boy Blue. And it's a poem in memory of when his son died. And it says the soldiers were staunch, and Little Boy Blue stood there with musket molds in their hand waiting for Little Boy Blue to come, but he never came. I think that deeply affected me, and when that happened, I became I coined a word. Maybe I always coin words to help deal with things, non-intentionally, emotionally unavailable. But that wasn't the end of death as a young woman. My husband, who was very talented like you, but he made smiles. He did Phyllis Diller's smile and everything. Went biking the day after Easter. He biked 60 miles in the beautiful desert of Palm Springs, and we came home, and I went off, toddling off to teach a university class at night, and I had 3 daughters, and I came toddling back home, and there was something wrong in the house.
Yes.
There's a sixth sense. I went upstairs to my daughter Felicia, and she was always the scholar of the group. She was busy studying on a phone, listening to music. And I said, "Where's Dad?" And he said, "Well, he had a little tummy ache." Well, when you're the only like medical person in the community, you have a lot of access and availability to people. And so I called the local CVS and they said, oh, Dr. Stanger, he went off to the hospital because we didn't have anything to prescribe to him. He had a little tummy ache. And I got back into the car, and it's almost like I could play this in slow motion for you. I got back in my car. I was only 1.5 miles from the local hospital. I drove into the hospital. I did not see his car. I went back onto the freeway, and then in the center divide was this brand new skating car. And somehow or other, again, slow motion, I pull down my window and I say, hi, I'm Dr. Stanger's wife. And the guy says, hi, I'm Dr. Stanger's patient. He just had a little accident, a little heart attack. Go back over to the hospital. So I drove back over to the hospital. And I ran through the doors and I saw this woman that was really scary. You know how life, because her son had died in a car accident.
Yes.
And she was coming towards me. And at that moment, my body froze. I knew, and that was the end of that. He had died of a sudden heart attack on the freeway. So that was a major, obviously they all were sudden deaths. They all were major, but I grasped it on. At first, I wondered, how does this happen? Like, what is it that happened in my family to cause so much pain, to cause so much sorrow? As a little girl, I'll backtrack a little bit.
Yes.
When my father died by suicide, I was really lucky. My mom didn't have much money, and I was sent away to camp. I went to a place called Camp Wood Echo, where Leon and Rose Rubenstein lived. And he had been a social worker. And I shot a bow and arrow. I shot a rifle. I rode horses, but it was a safe place. And I continued to go there for 14 years until I became actually a camp counselor. And if it wasn't for his holding environment, I'm not too sure I would have ever done anything, plus some of the young social workers that he had. So, I don't know. I didn't pay much attention in high school, except I liked English and I liked to read and I liked to make up stories and I liked to write. And when I went off to college, before I met my first husband, which I did when he was in dental school, I became an English lit major. So I learned micro to macro and John Donne and everything. But I went to work because I needed to work in a local settlement place and met my husband. And then I said, oh, I'm just going to become a social worker. I was supposed to become a lawyer, but I couldn't find the law school. We moved to San Diego.
Yes.
And so my passion really came that I went to social work school. I wrote really well. Maybe that's, I have all those books. Maybe that was the seedling for writing, but I wrote well for social work. I don't think I wrote well to be a New York Times bestseller. Okay. But I was somewhat colorful. And after I went to work. I had a bunch of children, as I told you. I had 3 daughters, a son that died, and I went back to work at the university in the School of Social Work. And I was really blessed because after he died, I didn't know what to do or how to do it. So I went back into the School of Social Work. And at that time, Abdullah, I know I'm jumping around a little, but trauma propelled me, or unfortunate accidents propelled me. And also what helped me were there were screens of opportunity. Andrew Billingsley was a great African-American author, and he wrote about screens of opportunity. There were people in my life that said, hey, you're okay. And you're enough. Because I never really thought I was enough, because as a little girl, you wonder, what did I do? What could I do? How could I know? And should I have done something differently? Because you have a lot of magical thinking. So, even if I backtrack from my father, I made up a story. Like, I didn't know how my father died. Nobody would allow me in those days to go to the funeral. Nobody told me anything, except one day. and everybody was shh, 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 hush, 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 hush. We're not going to tell you anything. And I was out on the playground at school because I didn't really want to go back to school. I was like, because everybody was there was all the secrets running around.
Yeah.
And I was out on the playground, and this little redhead, freckle-faced little girl named Ruthie Ann skipped happily over me. And she says, "Hi, Louise Ann." And I didn't really like her before, but I sure didn't like her after what she said. And she said, "Do you know how your daddy died?" Well, of course I did. I had
Wow.
imagination. I wasn't going to tell her that my dad was Superman and he got taken out by kryptonite because nobody told me. And then, in a moment like this, little Ruthie Ann, who had to hear it from her mom, had to hear it from her dad, said, "Louise," very like that. He hung himself with a tie.
Wow.
And that sent, just pierced your heart and sent things all the way through you. And nobody would talk about it. So I think I became a social worker, one, because of Mr. Rubenstein, because he provided a safe haven for me. Another guy named Bubba Schachter, who were social workers. And they said, "No, you are enough." And then I realized that I always wanted to help someone or help them navigate things that were bigger than them. So by fluke, I did go to graduate school in social work because I couldn't find the law school. I'm really happy I did. And then by fluke, I was only 22 when I got my master's. I wrote well. And they did the unthinkable.
Yeah.
Abdullah, they invited me to teach. I knew nothing. I mean, I walked into a room, just, how we walk into a room to get ready to speak, and then you realize, I don't really have anything to say, but I'm going to say something anyhow. Well, I was green, yellow, purple. I broke out into sweat. I managed to say my name, and then I managed to run out of the room. And my professor, who had been my mentor, doctor, he said, "It's okay. You have to go back in." And that pretty much, "It's okay. You have to go back in," I think was something that people did for me, that you were okay.
How old were you when this happened with your father?
I was 7 years old.
7. And at 7, you realize your father is gone now. Did you get any support from your surroundings, people around?
Not really, just Mr. Rubenstein. I didn't want to go to school at first. I did see spots. My mother ended up developing a substance abuse disorder, or at least for trying to deal with the tragedy of a suicide. And it must have been so hard for her because she was the daughter of a very successful gentleman, my grandfather, who had been partners in real estate and everything, but he was dead.
Yeah.
And she had 2 brothers, which were just mean. You know how families fight about money and want money and everything. And so she had no real support to turn to. And people, she felt shame and guilt, like, what could I have done?
Yeah.
And so she carried that, and she sort of nurtured that in a bottle. It took me many years to realize that my father was very ill. He had been in hospital, and at that time had gotten shock therapy.
Okay.
And had come out, and he actually had followed in the footsteps of his mother and father. Now, I didn't know that information till I was about 20. And here I was 7. And people they would take you places, but they also, you felt like they looked at you differently, like you're not okay, or your family's not okay.
It seems also you didn't just lose your father, you lost also your mother that
Yes.
day. And how did you cope with it later on till during your teenage years?
During my teenage years, I probably didn't pay attention and was just dating and was a little wild.
Yes.
I was wild. For me, I was wild. And then when I went off to college, again, I had these social workers. Because they sort of I worked in a camp, a camp, and I was a camp counselor, and somehow or other I mastered archery. I mean, it's the craziest thing in the world. I was in Bhutan a couple years ago, hadn't picked up a bow and arrow, and it had to be my resiliency. I'm in the middle of Bhutan. It's freezing cold. I am now 60 plus years old, and I picked up the bow and arrow. And I remembered you're supposed to smile like you're brushing your teeth. I got a bullseye. And then I went, gee, that must have saved me.
Mm-hmm.
The bullseye. So it's funny things like that. I mean, so there was always someone around me. I had good teachers, good mentors I had, and 3 of them were social workers. And then when I went away to college, I had a gentleman named Victor Cavalier who, I think he was an economics professor, but he said you could write whatever you want. So he let me write the history of Thorsten Veblen. I have no idea. And then I had good professors. I had all Mellon professors, and they would pencil whip you to death because you couldn't write a sentence. But there was something about the glint in their eye that I believed in. That's the only thing I can really think of. I didn't have an aunt or a relative or anybody else. I was pretty well on my own.
What do you think the social workers and this Mr. Rubenstein had as a character, so you felt safe and comfort?
I think they said that you were okay, and they gave me the same thing you try to do, and that's unconditional positive regard. And they didn't ever do a lot of talking about death or anything, but they said you're important. And it was a safe place to go because the world really wasn't that safe. My mother subsequently remarried someone who also had a substance use disorder. There was a lot of yelling and screaming and commotion in the house, and those were safe havens. I also had a best friend who had the perfect family. And I spent a lot of time at her house when I was in high school. But somehow or other, they said I was okay.
How do you define, from today's perspective, a safe space?
It's really, you're created a safe space right here. It's knowing that it's almost in the presence. It's almost no more in the words, but that here's a place, here's a holding environment. I'm not here to judge you. And that's a gift to be able to do that. It's quiet. It's not loud. It's not noisy, but it's how do we find that space and present it to you? So in 7 seconds, I think in 7 seconds, we decide if we can trust someone or not. And then after that, it's really all action.
What happened later on when your 3rd child was born, and how did this affect you from a trauma and grief perspective?
That was probably, when I think about all the deaths, probably the death of Eric was the hardest. From the standpoint where you put a little infant that you're supposed to care for to bed, and you wake up and all of a sudden you oversleep. And then the other part was my first husband was very narcissistic, and he did not have empathy. And he said, oh, we don't need to have a funeral. I said, we have to have a funeral. We have to have things. It was almost as if his psyche could not take this. And at that time, I did have a lot of friends who came by. I mean, again, my mother was, I have a word that I coined, non-intentional emotional unavailability. And I also had 2 children. I remember when Eric died, Felicia and Sydney were much younger, but Felicia was always very stalwart. And she came downstairs, and I'll never forget it. She had put a little Superwoman shirt underneath and this beautiful dress like you'd wear to Thanksgiving. And then my older daughter came by and they sat by me. But at that time, I had wonderful friends because literally is such a hard thing to wrap around your head. What did I do? What did I say? And Sid's death, which was in the literature, just doesn't happen to people who have money. Doesn't happen to people, you're supposed to be poor, you're supposed to do something. And what happens is I lived in a sort of Gone with the Wind kind of house. And so the staircase.
Yeah.
But when a Sid's death happened, the police come right away and they stand guard, and you're not allowed in the room because they suspect foul play.
Right.
And I had a wonderful neighbor. My husband wasn't home either. He had gone to a dental conference. And I had a wonderful neighbor who had been head of cardiology for University of California. He and his wife came down, and a lot of friends came, but you really sort of are detached somewhere else in your brain because the enormity of that is very hard. And physiologically, you can feel it because your arms ache. And you sort of wander off to silly things, like you return things. I remember returning stuff to CVS, like whether it was formula or something to do with the baby.
Yeah.
And then I had to say to a checkout counter, my baby just died. I mean, nobody knew that. That was, and you had a funeral that your husband didn't want to have. And you had a lot of people there. And again, I was pretty much on my own. My mother was on holiday in Mexico, and she said she couldn't get back. And that was painful. That was really, really tough. And then, you feel like, and of course it was the prince, because if you're Jewish and he was Sephardim, the king is dead and he was angry. But he also wasn't at home. So he was doing things he shouldn't have been doing when he was there. So that was very hard because you felt like somehow or other you had failed. And because I thought there was something wrong with him, and I would take him all the time to the pediatrician, and I'd say, there's something wrong. And they would say, no, Louise, there's nothing wrong. And you don't think it's a third child. Nothing should be wrong. And yes, there was something wrong. In retrospect, I think he was a gift. His name was Eric. And I learned that you could actually love someone and let them go.
Yes.
But that was really tough. Yes, I had a psychiatrist. Yes, I had therapy. And yes, I had good friends that would just let me rattle.
As a father, it's just hearing this, it gives me so much pain. I cannot imagine how much pain you have gone through losing a child at that age. And what also comes to mind is how this affected your other children,
Of course.
your relationship with your husband, and your presence to your children and to your husband as well.
Of course. But I did end up getting pregnant again, but I can't imagine how I wasn't really present. I think I had to be honest and say and that's why I coined the word, non-intentional emotional unavailability.
Yes.
So, I think for Felicia's always been the sort of the bright one, the shining star, the MBA, the Stanford grad, but she bubbled. And Sydney later had some issues and everything, but I don't think their father was available to them either. So, but I think this had to affect them in terms of their own courage, in terms of their own sort of way of looking at the world and being willing to do things. Although both of them all three are big risk takers.
Yeah.
So somehow or other, I guess the good thing is I had some kind of courage and some sort of resiliency to keep going. And I had a great Dr. My psychiatrist's name was Dr. Hassler. And so he was at that point a training analyst. Do you know training analysts are not supposed to see clients if there's anything traumatic that happens to them?
No.
Yeah, they're supposed to be training. They're supposed to just have happy neurotics. So the poor guy had a rough time. But I also had the school of social work and that whole community, and they rallied around me. So I guess I just went and put one foot forward after the other, learned to grieve my losses and to move on.
What helped you to grieve in a proper way?
Maybe yelling, screaming, crying, writing for me today. If you ask, how do you grieve today? I would say write. Talk to other people. Be out. Like, I was never a great athlete, but swim. Swimming is very healing. Anything hitting, screaming, yelling. People, I think the thing that maybe helped me the most is people let me just rattle on.
Yeah.
Just rattle on. I might not have made more sense, or they would take me somewhere. I would go with them. There was not like you have to be all alone. There was someone to help with the baby to, take care of him. When my first husband died after that, when the girls were, Shelby was about 7, Sydney was close to 20, Felicia was in high school. I had great friends, and they just rallied around me. And I remember I had one friend that was head of the Republican Party and head of the Christian something or other, and another friend that was Jewish. And so there are two sides of the house, and there was food, there was everything, and they just took care of me.
When you go forward now with your first husband's death, how was the effect within your family and your children at that time?
My oldest daughter probably was most deeply affected. She could do no wrong, and she did plenty of wrong. She was beautiful. She'd be like someone on a cover of a magazine, and she lost the love of her life. My middle daughter put her head to the nose grind, and it's funny. She loved and he was hard. Loved and didn't love him, but like she's married now with her own child, and her father-in-law is an oral maxillofacial surgeon. And literally, her dad was a dentist, and that comes with a lot of things. And my husband that I remarried, he's an athletic director. He wore jockwear. Very different. Totally, absolutely different. And she has that dad in her father-in-law. And the youngest one, Shelby, actually was brought up more by her stepfather.
Yes.
So everybody had differential reactions to death, and everybody grieved at a different time.
Yes.
And so that's really, and telling tales and telling stories and being open and being honest. I think I'm fair. I think I've been open with the girls, but each one of them, if you interviewed them, they have their own story, and you would see a kaleidoscope of feelings.
Did the multiple sudden deaths increase your anxiety about losing someone loved?
And I think what I was always worried about, I had to work through a lot of things. Like after, it happened with the kids too. Like after their dad died, like you get very worried that if you leave, somebody's not going to come back. It's just as simple as that. Like I remember I went off after their dad died. I just went somewhere to the store, and someone was and they panicked. Like someone's not going to come back. And I had a lot of training because I wondered, gee, if you leave, I have a hard time saying bye. Okay, that's how it manifests itself. I'm much better now as I approach 79, but it used to be I couldn't say goodbye. I could say aloha because I was afraid if I said goodbye, you would never come back or I didn't have the chance to say goodbye. So that is the clearest way that it manifested itself in saying goodbye and then being able to trust yourself that that person's not going to disappear. That and that probably translates over like, is this really a friendship? Is this not a friendship? Like not trusting that part. So I had to do a lot of work in that arena.
When you look at that time, did it also help you to get more present and grateful for what you have, present in the sense of being more available for the people you are
Because
around with?
yeah, well, it did. But I don't know in the very beginning if I was more available. I think I was somewhere other than I think in the beginning with those deaths, I was not intentionally emotionally unavailable. I was present. Oh, okay. I could repeat absolutely everything you said. I could tell you everything you said. I would be in the room with you with what you said, but I'm not convinced that I was present. And so now with grandchildren, I can be present, or I can be fully in there. But I don't think, truthfully, I was. And that's something that I have to bear witness to.
I would like to hear from someone like you who experienced multiple grief in different
In different ages, yes.
ages. How do you define grief today?
I think grief has to do with losses, and every day we experience a little loss. But I think really grief is also an invitation. And it's an invitation to cherish life. It's an invitation to cherish being in the moment, being present with you, being honored to be with you in Oxford, in London, and to take every opportunity. I have a saying that I really like that I use a lot with clients, but I think I use it a lot with myself. The courage is fear that said its prayers. I think that you have to be courageous, and you can't stay. I mean, my book that I've had here for Reflection on Aging, it talks about let the music in. What's the music that I hear? You know, I like country music, or what is that music? And reflect and be active. What do I do in the world? Like, but that's pickleball, swimming. Be active in my career and talk about the tough stuff. Because if you don't, and I think in talking about the tough stuff, you get to grieve your losses. If you stay stuck, which is easy to do on Pity Path Lane and Martyrdom Alley, and say, poor little me, because terrible things happen to good people. You know, there's that wonderful book by that rabbi, when bad things happen to good people, Rabbi Lerner. But you also then have a choice. Am I going to go down Pity Path Lane the rest of my life, or am I going to just try? And it's courage, but it's also having someone else there, like sort of like a little string. You can do this. You're good enough. And to act and to be an active participant in life.
So someone external, but also you can, as a mantra to yourself.
Yeah. So that, I think that, and also like my first book, it was Keep Falling Up. Okay. That was the title of my first book. You have to keep falling up. Somewhere in my brain, it said, it's not okay. You're allowed to grieve, but you're not allowed not to live.
Does grief and losing people like you have experienced make you, or made someone in general, also more resilient?
Well, I would guess so. I mean, I think you're resilient. That's an interesting word. Yeah, I think I am resilient, but so are you, and so could anybody else be. And it means that I was able to weather several storms. But everybody experiences hiccups in their life. Everybody experiences storms. It's how they embrace that and how they do it. Like I'm very big on you can't stay in Pity Path Lane and Martin Alley and Misery Way.
Yeah.
Okay? You can, and as you know, as clinicians or as an owner of a treatment center, people come all the time, and they have to get that stuff out.
Yes.
However they do it, whatever modality you care to use, you've got to get that out. But then you have a choice. And I mean, that's why I like my last book, because it's just fun. But it says, put your big girl panties on, put your big boy panties on. And it's not telling you don't feel your feelings, but do you want to live? And what's the quality of your life going to be? Because you have such a little time and you just don't know where it's going to be or where it's going to end. And to be able to be alive, to be able to be here in Oxford, to be able to be of service to someone else and also service to yourself. That's a gift.
Certainly. I think a sudden death or losing someone can be an invitation to awaken, to embrace life, to define what I want to do in this life. What's for the time left? What is it I want to leave behind? And that's particularly happened also to me when I lost my father. My father was still young. And this was the moment for me where I redefined what are the values I want to stand for, and what is it I want to enjoy in this life and do. And this led me to what I do today, basically.
Well, that's beautiful, and I can relate very much to that. And I think that's what we try to do. You know, what legacy do you want to leave? You know, and it doesn't mean it's written in gold stone or it's written in Oxford. But what is your legacy, and what would you like people to say about the way you lived your life and the courage that you had and your willingness to engage and your impetus to, well, in our case, we're in the helping profession. You know, I don't want anyone to feel ever that they're alone.
Yes.
And that they were, you know, not good enough. I guess that's the biggest thing, especially when you're a little kid and you're 7 and you've got all these magical things happening around you with death, that somehow or other you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, and somehow or other you're an imposter, that you don't have to have that. And if I can help you unpack that, and then we can have a whole new way for your identity to be who you're meant to be. Not who I want you to be, but who you're meant to be.
Absolutely. Cannot agree more.
I guess that leads. So I'm writing a new book. I mean, I have a book here that's called Reflections on Aging that I love, but I'm working on a new book, and maybe it's I never thought of it till just now talking with you. The working title is Trauma is Your Superpower.
Tell me more about that concept, because I love that wording, because this reframes completely from being self-pity to it made something with me. I'm empowered. I can make something big out of it.
So, you know, we're at this conference and I really have mixed feelings about how they present trauma. I do personally. And I started working, this time I'm working with the coach on my book. I've always written everything myself. I actually have a coach to help me with this 5th book. But I said trauma, when we were talking about it, I said, well, trauma is really your superpower. Because if we don't find a way to transcend, it's not, and again, it's doing the crying, it's doing the work, it's being okay. But we have to take that event and be able to transcend whatever that is. I mean, I worked with, I'm speaking on something I'm not famous in, but I'm speaking tomorrow on women who are widowed at a young age. And then specifically, I worked with the New York Fire Department, the widow of 9/11. Well, if they don't, they had to transcend what happened. And trauma doesn't have to be this big T that's emblazoned on you with this, but it does give you an opportunity, a gift, And instead of looking at it just as, you have to see it as a gift. What gift does this give me? What lesson can I have? And what can I do with this gift? It's not the Christmas gift, it's not the Kwanzaa gift, it's not the Hanukkah gift, but it is the reality of the world. And so, what do I do with this gift that was given to me? And how do I use that gift?
Yes, it's difficult, most likely, to turn right away in this. So you
Yes.
need first some time to process, to allow, and to allow the feelings, the emotions, and then transition into that. The question is how long every individual may need to overcome this phase.
Well, that's probably our $64,000 question.
Yeah.
It's just that, you see clients and I see clients. And if they're still wallowing at what happened when they were 7, they were 8, they were 24, and they're, in their 30s, how long are you going to give them to stay on pity path lane? And I know that sounds harsh, but then I just have to ask that person, how's that working for you?
Yes.
What benefit do you have? What does this give you? Does it give you the ability to stay mad? Does it give you the ability to say sorry? Does it give you to be sexually non-available? What's the payoff?
Yes.
And what is your real fear? And I think it comes down, if you really learn about me, you won't like me. So I can stay behind this cloak. And I don't mean it that way, but I mean, it's really, how does it work for you? And maybe we have to be direct when I am fairly direct when I work with people, but you don't walk into a room and say, what's that? But you learn and you do a dance.
When you look at grief in general, are there misconceptions out there?
Oh, thank God. You don't have another 2 hours about grief. Like, even the words that you use, there's misconceptions about, oh, you'll be fine. You won't miss him, or she won't miss her. It's all better. It'll be all better. And then there's this notion that, within, grief, it's all gone. It must have been at least the 30 days. It depends on your culture also. But in a year, what? You're still like stuck on that?
Yeah.
Or how could you feel sad that your dog died? There's all misconceptions on dating, sex, being together, and what's acceptable and non-acceptable grief. And it's culturally based too. Because different cultures will say different things, or they'll have different garbs to wear. But there is no recipe or workbook out there. This is how you must grieve.
Yes.
But I do think you have to allow people the opportunity to just ramble. I guess that's, to be themselves, to let them find their path, to be a guide or a navigator with them. Allow them, whatever their culture is, whatever their customs are, to do that, to have permission to laugh.
Yes.
And you don't have to shroud yourself all in black. You're allowed to get dressed. You're allowed to do things. You're for a woman or a man that's widowed, you're allowed to go out and date.
Yes.
And there's no rule that said, when I was interviewing women all over the world, someone went to bed right away. Others would never go out with anybody else. Or someone said, really funny, well, I don't really want another husband. I just want a wife to take care of everything. So there is no right or wrong, but grief hits you. I do think grief, it's well documented, grief will hit you in waves. You can be somewhere and you're walking down the street and all of a sudden there's a trigger.
How should someone support another who is in grief?
Allow them the opportunity to be who they are. You don't have to say that everything's going to be all better, because things are not all better. Things will be different.
Yeah.
Take them places. I remember I had some wonderful friends when I had another, someone helped me pick out clothes, like to bury someone. I had no more desire to pick out clothes to just go with you and do those things, or go to the grocery store with you, or give you food, or say I'll take the kids for a moment, or come and visit you. Be in connection. A lot of people in widowhood, which I'll talk about tomorrow, they run away. Like one of the greatest things is, and I've interviewed women who are widowed all over the world, but some will come up to you, I really want to thank you for letting me know your husband died, because you know what I just did? No, what did you just? Well, I just went and took out insurance. Or you might get a statement like, my husband just started going out and it's your fault. And you go, pardon me? How could it be my fault? Well, your husband died, so he thinks he needs to go out with another woman. I mean, people will say the craziest thing, and some people will run away. Because now, with a widow in particular, because I studied so many of them, that you might have been used to going out. This was your best friend. Like, I don't know if you and your wife have a best friend. You go out as a couple. Well, guess what? That isn't anymore. So now what do we do? Who are we invited to? And then I remember a wonderful woman. She's the most elegant woman I've interviewed. She called herself a payer lady. And I go, what's a payer lady? And she said, well, when my husband was alive, we used to go all to these events together. But now I am just a payer lady. And I said, what's that mean? And she said, well, I'm only invited if I pay.
Okay.
So people will change. There'll be people that'll be in your life, and there'll be people that disappear. And there's really, you can't say, you don't know exactly who those people are going to be.
Yes. You lose some identity also.
And then you remember in the olden days, what do I sign on the checkbox? It's only recently that you can check off being a widow or a widower on a box to fill out.
We look forward. This had several impact on you in your life, on your work. What type of work have you been doing beside being a great author and writing multiple books?
I don't know. I've had the pleasure of learning how to do work. I like working in teams. I love working with younger people, Max, and I've worked as a family whisperer for youth prevention. I like being a family whisperer. I'm really good with families. I'm really good at family mapping, which is something I am known for, and helping families be who they are, and who they're meant to be.
Yes.
I do interventions, but they're invitations to change. But at the same time, they're just really, I think lately I've been doing more subscription work, which is working with families and working over time to see how they can become and how they can become the best that they can be. So I love doing that. I also love being a grandmother, which is pretty exciting because I never had a grandmother, and watching these young people blossom, and being, just, I don't know, being alive. Being here, being alive. I mean, earlier this year I was in Sweden. That was so exciting. Like being able to still go into the world and being of service. And lately, I've been speaking, but I've been speaking at very many different places, like much more like women's groups, or National Charity League. Like my interests are, like, I love to talk, and I love talking about Reflections on Aging because it's a fun book to talk about, or that. But I wanted to speak more with the general public and help them, as opposed to, how we're presenting at national conferences. So I've been doing like more speaking in unlikely places, whether it's lawyer groups or things like that.
You like to work with families. What do you do for them? What do you do with them?
Well, I hope I have them function better. But anyhow, when a family calls you, it's usually because they have an identified loved one. I call them an ILO, an identified loved one who has a problem. And that could be anyone from you, being a father, but a lot of times it's a child or an adult child. And how can we help this person be the person that they're meant to be?
Yes.
So, but when I start out, I don't put families in a group together. I do something called family mapping, which means I interview, I have a big piece of paper. It looks like the writings of a mad woman, all these colored pens. And I would sit there and you would tell me your story. Because most of all, I'm interested in your story. Tell me about your family and tell me about your loved one. But I'm going to learn everything I can about you because I'm going to get a portrait. Now, obviously, you called because you were worried about Sally or Susie or Johnny. But in the meantime, I'm going to interview everybody individually because then I have a portrait of what's really going on in the family from a variety of different perspectives. Think about Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, or there was a wonderful book many years ago. It was called The Alexandria Quartet by Lawrence Durrell. So the first time I read that, it was the 4 books, but I couldn't figure out that they all took place in the same marketplace in Morocco. And I went, wait a minute. And that's with families, if they all have a different story. And then you're sort of like Sherlock Holmes. Yes, you're worried about Johnny or Judy, but you're really not because you learn so much more. You learn Susie has maybe an eating disorder and there's an affair going on and there's other types of isms going on. So then you get a chance to figure out how am I going to move this family? We might start with the identified loved one, but we're sure going to move somewhere else.
So the whole systemic part, try to understand this and then get to what is really underlying.
Yeah, what's really
in the family
underlying.
system.
And then, but do it in a different way. You know, when people interview, they usually have their little notebook and they have like a gene. And I don't do that because I've been greatly influenced by a woman by the name of Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot. And she is Native American, African American, and wrote a book, The Art and Science of Portraiture. Somehow or other, I fell in love with her actually when I was doing my doctoral dissertation. And I convinced a business professor, and I'm so proud, Joanna Hunziker, and I said, I just want to go around and interview widows who were widowed at a young age. Can I go do that? And she said, sure. And I said, what kind of research? And said, I'm going to do portraiture because I'm going to get portraits of different people. And whatever that is, I love doing that because I love to learn your story. And then I love to feel like suddenly like, oh, you're like Sherlock Holmes. You're going to put together. And I like that a lot because inside, and I think that every treatment center or behavioral health care can do that. That's why I like treatment without walls sometimes, because when you're just the client, and then maybe Susie does come to the balance, but I hold a portrait of everybody. So I have more information than you're ever going to get from from your patient. And then how do we work that and how do we change that and what happens over time? And then you may end up helping that one person that ends up going to the balance, but you end up really working with the mother over time.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. It's the understanding the origin, but it's also about probably the families would contact you for an intervention initially, but then you would go into the family mapping part.
Yeah. Well, before I say, or we'll say, well, maybe we'll do family coaching, and I said, well, before we do that, I'm happy to work with you, but we're going to do a family map together. And how I do that is I interview everybody individually because I really want to learn from each one of you. And it obviously is about Joey or Sally. But when you do that, though, it's amazing because you give everybody a voice. and you're not excluding anybody. So in that moment of time, that's the only person, and they feel important. And the information they can give you is so vital. And then because you're drawing a map,
Yes.
and then you get much more information about the person, about the family, and then you figure out where you're able to go or where you're not able to go.
And it takes away a little bit the focus and victimization of
Yeah.
this individual loved one.
That's right. It's no longer the ILO. The ILO becomes the family.
Yes.
And so I love doing that. And lately I've been doing more family work like that than actual intervention. Or sometimes they become long subscription kinds of cases, and then they change. So,
Yes.
I have a family that originally I started out, and they're very high profile, very powerful. They had a son who was a twin who was breaking windows and doing stuff in Venice, California. And yes, there was a traditional intervention, but after that, the mother I became a consigliere to. Very interesting family, two very different religions, and how that affected us. So while initially contracted for this, and there's still a wellness coach with this young man 3 years later, although, oh, I know, it's a good, so this young man we did an intervention. He went to a treatment center. The treatment center gave him a wellness coach, okay? Not me. And he was very young, and they loved him, and they took him in, and he decided that he wanted to do something else. So he became a realtor, and he traveled around the world. And from time to time, the mother always stayed in touch with me. She really liked me and everything. And she owned a lot of property, and she was in San Diego, and I was going to go see her. And she calls me and she says, I need your help. And I've always been available to her. Father just recently liked me, but he didn't really, but they were separated. And it turned out that they had hired a coach, which is a shame. You never do that. Gave him a job. And the young man went to go to his apartment, and he went in the apartment, which they had owned, and the dog was barking. There was a truck there, and he was dead. He had OD'd. He had relapsed. And so the mom needed immediate help. The son, was devastated. He was a freshman in college, and this was his coach. And so I helped the mom with the funeral. I remained the consigliere. The son really wanted nothing to do with me. But 3 months down the lane, he was having school problems, and talked with the mom, talked with the dad, and I said, what if we put a wellness coach in, because he had executive functioning problems, to help with, this is a true story, and you'll see Max later, but executive functioning problem. And so Jack, who works with Max, I saw he'd never been anywhere. I said, Jack, just go. And he was good with executive functioning. His job was to join up with this young man. Okay? Because you couldn't go in with grief or loss or anything else. He needed to go back to college. And I remained a consigliere on the outside to the mother. Okay? Totally different situation. And to this day, this young man has the same wellness coach, still helping him with executive functioning, but doing really well. The mom, I still is in my wheelhouse, although she's all over the world. She's every which way. But they survived a traumatic death. And the young man survived it, but the way to get him back into being able to work with someone was non-traditional. You didn't say you need to go to treatment, you need to do anything. He'd help you with the homework.
Yes. interventions. I know there are like you
So
see in movies
no,
and
no, no.
TV how an intervention should be. What's your understanding of an intervention, and
Okay,
how does it work?
totally different than, I mean, I think I have a textbook, The Definitive Guide to Addiction Intervention, that I was commissioned to by Rutledge. An intervention is just an invitation to change. I never do them alone. I am not a lone ranger. I don't ride up on a horse and say, giddy up, come with me. I always work with someone else, and I always try to handpick that person to be a great match. Obviously, if we're doing an intervention on a younger person, I'm not going to be that one. You do a lot of due diligence. Sometimes we do what's called treatment without walls, which would be very close to, the balance, providing treatment either through an Airbnb or in the home. So you change the whole trajectory of the family, or you make sure that you have to give 3.
Yes.
So you're not beholden to it. But it is a event if you're going to get people all together and get them in a room and do that. Although I haven't done that kind of intervention for a very long time. It's more or less a subtle invitation to change and figuring out what the best way in is.
So don't like push and don't write letters.
Don't push and see where the opening is, because maybe you just need to go out to lunch with somebody. Maybe you don't need a big event, but if you do an intervention, you should be a minimum of 2 professionals. Why? Because if you come in on your white horse and Johnny or Sally go off to treatment, you have now left an entire person with an event that they like, what do we do next? Are you kidding me? And they have nowhere to process, and they walk away with whatever they do. So you want to be mindful that you might have someone that you've now called unidentified loved one, but you have a bunch of people that are identified loved. And then also when you do an intervention, it's just the mom and dad. You're looking all the time for an outlier. Like, I always wonder, who is the person that's most important to that person?
Yes.
It might be their tennis coach. It might be their nanny that brought them up. It might be the shop clerk that they go and talk to all the time.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to go on a hunting expedition, and you have to be willing to interview a lot of people. And then you have to, I think there's a little bit of God shot or magic, in it, and figure out what the right way in is. So they will be, and then you have to be able to be flexible and go in another way. Because I've seen failed interventions, but then when you go back and you do it a different way, it sort of works. And get your ego out of the way, because you're not God.
Can we talk about your latest book, Reflection on Aging?
I love it. I'm so excited about it.
So what can you just share with us what you write about here?
Okay,
and
so
why at that age you write about the reflection?
yeah, okay. So the fun part about this book is it wasn't supposed to be a book. I wanted a photo shoot, ego, for my website. And Cheryl Fox, who is the photographer here, is a delight. She's a world-class photographer. And and she had just done a book called A Few Good Women, which Max Mayer had underwritten, which I got to meet her. But she did a lot of Beyonce, that's her clientele. And I called Cheryl because she was friends with my oldest daughter. And I said, Cheryl, I want to do a photo shoot. I want things. She said, great. And I said, well, she's in LA. And I said, well, I love the Sunset Marquee. That's a great backdrop. She said, great, we'll do a photo shoot. So the Marquee is a home of Nightingale Studios, music, and all kinds of celebrities, but very no one would ever know you're there. Okay? So brought clothes, had makeup, had hair, and Cheryl and I ran around, and it's a small hotel.
Yes.
It's not a big hotel. Ran around and we took pictures all day long. And it was like so much fun. It was like there was music in the air. And I know all the doormen there because I used to live there. So it's sort of like my home away from home. And when I got done, I took a piece of paper like this.
Mm-hmm.
And Cheryl said, I think, Cheryl, but hey. And I wrote down, let the music in, reflect, talk about the tough stuff, put your big girl panties on. And I think I wrote celebrate yourself. I don't know that I wrote when I grow old, I'm going to live in the sun. And I said, I have a book. And Cheryl said, okay, great. I can produce it. All right. So this was like, and she said, she's really not going to. So I went back and I just started writing. And the truth is, I did have a little help from AI because I'd never used AI before. And a wonderful world famous person like yourself, John Assaraf, who speaks all over the world, he said, Louise, you need to meet Claude. I go, who's Claude? He said, he can be your boyfriend, but at least it won't take you 5.5 years to write a book. So when you put stuff in Claude, it just makes it neat and makes a thing. It doesn't change. You can have your own voice and everything. So in about 2.5 months, I call Cheryl up. I go, Cheryl, the book's done. And she said, what? The book is done? Are you kidding me? What are you talking about? And she said, okay. So she it's like a composer. She put the music to the words and we produced this. And this was a very inexpensive book to produce. I mean, maybe $10,000. That is inexpensive for a book, but the music just flowed across and it was so much fun to write. And really it just is let the music in. What's the sounds that you hear, be active. What do you do to take care of yourself? Reflect. You've got to go backward. That's exactly what we did today is reflect. Talk about the tough stuff. We talked about the tough stuff today. You didn't mince any pushing. You pushed all the way with all the tough stuff. And then in the end, you say, okay, well, let's celebrate. Let's celebrate you. Let's celebrate me. And let's celebrate all the people that we work with so they can be the person that they're meant to be. And then the part that really hits you is suddenly when you grow old, what am I going to do? So I said, when I grow old, I'm going to live in the Sunset Marquee, which my family really believes me that I'm going to go live at the Marquee because it's vibrant, it's joyous, it's reverberating, but and this is just a way to approach life philosophically.
It's beautiful. And what I wonder, I have still a couple of years to go till I get 79.
You've got plenty of years to go.
How is it to be 79?
This is the first year I have been worried about my birthday, to be honest. I always love birthdays. I love celebrating them. This year my birthday is October 18th, and it is tough because I have some family members that have some problems. But if I look and I go, okay, usually you go in 10, I wrote a letter or I did a blog. Well, 10 years from now, what would I be like? And that was more frightening to me because what will I do? How will my health be? Where will I be? Where will I be living? What will I do for fun? So somehow this is a scary year for me.
Yeah. Is it the first time you have asked yourself or you reflected about your age? Or
no, this is the first time that I've been uncomfortable about my age. I love my age. I love birthdays. I love celebrating them. Like, I'm going to have a party. I wish you could come. But it sounds like a kid's party. It's small, but it's going to have a caricaturist. It's got this world class. It's got this singer that he's great. He was a finalist on American Idol, and we know him because he plays. And I have a caricaturist and a fortune teller or something like that coming in there. It's like having a 12-year-old birthday party, and someone said, "Why aren't you waiting for 80?" And I said, "I can't."
Yeah.
I cannot wait for 80. I'm going to do this now. And it's only for about 30 people, but anyone wants to come, there, I would like you to fly and be my guest. But this year it has a different meaning. It's like I feel no matter what I say, no matter what I do, when I was 20, I read a book by Theodore Litz. It said, as you grow old, you creak, and you're no longer that well-oiled machine. You creak and groan a bit. And yes, I creak and groan a bit. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what that future means. And so I try to stay focused on the present, being grateful, because I think that's a little scary for me out there.
Yes. Do you think it is because of the number now, 79, and then getting into your 80s?
Yeah.
Or do you feel something in your body changing, or are
Well, I
you
think it's
getting...
a number. Well, yeah. I mean, like, I can't stand as well on one foot, like when someone was doing the exercise,
Yeah.
stand on one foot. I see a family member aging, and then I think about relevancy. You know, I'm not Grandma Moses who's going to paint to her 90s, and you're just going to call me up and say, come and speak. And, you know, I always wonder about relevancy. Like, I would always stop and, you know, because there's always someone super smarter, faster, brighter, etc., etc. I'm lucky I get to travel, but I can't imagine just. I don't know what I don't know what I'm really going to do. Work has been a very central part of my identity, and so and charity work has always been. It just feels like this is a different precipice.
Yeah. How would you feel if no one would call you up anymore for work?
I would feel sad. I mean, I would feel like, well, I would know that if I wasn't, I mean, I would feel a loss, and then I would figure out, what do I do next? But that would be sad, because that would be a chapter that was well written, but now we have to do something different. And so I think that's my fear. No one will ever call me up again.
Yeah. Is it something inevitable, like everyone will experience, or...
Well, no, of course it's inevitable, but that doesn't mean, but you would have to reconcile it individually.
Yeah, so we all have to go through it, and I think you are still a strong woman, one of the strongest women I know,
Oh,
at
you're
the
so
age
sweet.
of 79 for sure. I have a couple of questions to you.
Yes.
What do you do today in your daily life to stay in balance?
To stay in balance, I walk. I swim. I like to swim, and I can do that better. I was playing pickleball, but then I hurt my back. I talk to. I mean, I have two. I have my husband, but I have these two wonderful golden doodles, little doodles, Teddy and Coco. I think they keep me in balance.
Yes.
I have grandchildren that I get to be present for, and it's fun. Like Alexandra is beautiful, but she's 5'3", long red hair, and she's now going to be 12. There's just going to be that short period of time now that she's not going to be wanting to be with a grandma, but I'd love to take her around the world. I'm lucky because two of my daughters live in San Diego. Shelby, who is the podcaster, the adventurer, and the writer. And she's so much fun because she's always looking for a wild idea. Sydney is just very philanthropic. And Felicia, I think of as such a wonderfully fabulous, resilient woman. Now, she's the one that, of all, she's the one whose home burned to the ground in the Palisades fires. And she and her husband, I mean, my grandson just started college, but they're called the Get Lost couple. And they have been going around the world. I think right now they're in Argentina. But she wrote a blog I was really proud of her. She wrote a blog for 90 days because 5,000 homes were burned in there, and you left with like your backpack. You didn't think you weren't going to come back. And she's written and written, and I'm so incredibly proud of all the girls because they're all courageous in their own right. But right now, her taking her life and saying, okay, I'm going to travel the world. They have the ability to do that. They already were through Europe and now they're in South America. Then they're going to go. But to be able to lose everything, like, I don't think I lost as much as she lost.
If there is one thing you can tell everyone in the world, what would you recommend them to do?
Keep following up. I really think that's my model, and that courage is fear that says prayers. That a lot of things will happen to you, and you're going to feel stuck, and but courage will allow you, or give you the opportunity, the invitation, to do things. And I guess it's always been keep following up.
Thank you very much, Louise. It was a pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you for the work you do as an author, as such a big inspiration and helpful person for so many families out there. I enjoyed very much speaking to you today, and I'm very proud to know you and in the first place as well. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Oh my God, my heart is so full. Thank you so much for providing the space and the invitation for us to talk, and for allowing me the opportunity to share. You're quite a gentleman, and I can only imagine how beautiful you are for doing this for the people of the balance, but how beautiful for all the people that you're interviewing today. What a grace you're giving them. So thank you.
Thank you so much.